Salofalava, this is Pacific Waves from RNZ Pacific. I'm Susana Swiswiki. Coming up.
Finding it really difficult to understand what the threat to the US economy there is in the Pacific.
Pacific nations puzzled over Trump's tariffs. Also,
so I'm feeling all the adrenaline that I think the students are feeling, especially being with my cousin.
Not a cloud in sight on the last day of Polyfest, and Moana Pacifica record their first back-to-back win. Pacific nations are disappointed and are trying to wrap their head around United States tariffs. Fiji's finance minister says its 32% tariff by the Trump administration, the highest in the Pacific, is unfair. While the government spokesperson for New Zealand territory of Tokelau says he doesn't understand how the Pacific threatens the US's economy. Caleb Fotheringham has more.
United States President Donald Trump's charts claim Fiji charges the US 63% tariffs, citing currency manipulation and trade barriers. But the Fijian government disputes the figures. The US calculated so-called reciprocal tariffs based on if the US has a trade deficit with trading partners. In Fiji's case, it exports more than it imports from the United States, so it was given a high tariff. The island nation's finance minister and deputy prime minister, Biman Prasad, says it's disappointing.
We feel that using trade deficit to calculate the reciprocal tariff rate is wrong. Trade deficits aren't tariffs.
He says Fiji was readying themselves like all nations for the tariff announcement, but were not sure on the details.
It wasn't clear whether they were going to look at every country in every part of the world, or the initial things coming out was about, bigger countries which had huge, trade deficits.
The tariffs reached as far as Tokelau, a non-self-governing territory of New Zealand with a population of about 1,500 people. The territory was given the baseline 10% tariff. Tokelau government spokesperson Al Cosetino Vitale says it shows that the United States knows very little about his territory.
I'm finding it really difficult to understand what the threat to the US economy there is in the Pacific. And I think we're kind of saddened.
Sione Tuufa with the University of Auckland's Business School says the tariffs are undermining a decade of goodwill. He says Pacific nations will start looking away from the US.
You look at it holistically with the tariffs, the withdrawal from the climate agreements in relation to the withdrawal of US AID from their initiatives, and that adds up.
The Northern Mariana Islands, or CNMI, is already in a terrible position economically. The US territory has been unable to recover its tourism industry post-COVID-19, which has resulted in the shutdown of several large businesses. Mark Rabigo, RNZ CNMI correspondent, says the territory needs to hunker down and pray.
It would be devastating, of course, to an economy as small as the CNMI, and of course in the States, because basically all goods coming from China or Europe or whatever will have an added tax to it, so everything would be more expensive.
However, Mr. Rabigo says there could be a bright side, with the possibility that tariffs could reignite the territory's domestic manufacturing industry.
Manufacturing companies could actually set up shop in the CNMI, and basically the CNMI could be an intermediary where they could make goods here, just like what happened during the garment industry.
Biman Prasad says the government will make its decision on what to do about the tariffs once the impact becomes more clear. He says some goods could become cheaper. For example, China will likely look for new markets to buy its goods.
There is a lot of uncertainty, and the expectation of what might happen or what other countries do in the short to medium term will have to be factored in the policies and the decisions that we make here in the Pacific and in Fiji, about how we respond to this.
He says the Trade Ministry is talking with its US counterparts and other trade partners about next steps.
There was rain, there were clouds, but the sun finally decided to come out on the last day of Polyfest. RNZ Pacific spoke to a range of performers and festival goers over the past 4 days, each there for their own special reasons, yet collectively enjoying the 50th anniversary celebrations at the Manukau Sports Bowl. Coco Lance reports.
There was no shortage of colour, beautiful voices and outstanding talent from Wednesday through to Saturday, as thousands of performers and attendees showed up and showed out for Polyfest. Throughout the week, we spoke with some wonderful attendees and performers about how the Polyfest experience had been for them. It was the first Polyfest for former Miss Pacific Islands, Moimoana Schwenker, who was there in support of her cousin on the Samoa stage.
I'm really excited. I feel like I've been really welcomed into the community here in Tamaki Makaurau, and my first Polyfest. So I'm feeling all the adrenaline that I think the students are feeling, especially being with my cousin, because I know he's nervous, but he's very proud to be Samoan, and this is an opportunity for him to showcase that.
St Mary's College head girl Grace Tipe said they dedicated their performance to past pupils to mark the school's return to Polyfest in over 30 years.
Mita ilo anganuu, be proud of your culture and just give it a go, because when we're on stage we're not only representing ourselves but we're representing our ainga and our sisters who didn't get this opportunity. So it's a privilege to be able to carry their legacy on our shoulders while we siva.
Chris Gonefelenisi, a Polyfest veteran and 10-year volunteer, continued his support of the event despite living with a disability. He is one of many behind-the-scenes workers who have tirelessly supported the festival's operation.
Building stages, putting up fences, signages and mesh with all the guys in the team. It was just awesome, just being together, and not only that, and when the event's on, it's just experiencing all the different cultures.
Josephina Tamatoa, daughter of Mangere College matriarch, the late Melea Sam, who was a lead coordinator of Polyfest Samoan stage for over 20 years, was emotional at the outpour of tributes.
It's beautiful to see that she's getting so many tributes through so many schools' performances. So from the bottom of my heart and my family's heart, it's just really beautiful. So it's really hard to be here. Like, it's very emotional. But it's very, I don't know what the word is. Like, it's good to be here. It's hard, but it's good.
With the 50th celebrations now finished, organisers will be thinking ahead for Polyfest 2026.
The Papua New Guinea region of Bougainville, which is seeking independence, continues to face trauma that can be traced back to the 8 years of civil war from 1989. A new blog called Post-Conflict Bougainville, written by academics from the Australian National University, Sinclair Dinnan, Miranda Forsyth and Dennis Guyai, has detailed much of this and what they think should be done. RNZ Pacific heard from Miranda Forsyth recently, and now Don Wiseman has spoken with Dennis Guyai, a Bougainvillean who was formerly with the Bougainville Revolutionary Army.
You have been involved in the work on this post-conflict in Bougainville blog. One of the things that you guys have identified is that there's a need for a lot more work in terms of dealing with the underlying problems from that civil war and so on. And this is the sort of work that you've been doing now for more than 30 years, as you explained. What do you see that work involves?
Okay. In Bougainville, although we have got the autonomous Bougainville government, although we have voted for independence, although we believe that we have disposed most of the weapons of war, there still remain important issues that we need to deal with. And among the many issues that we need to deal with, one of which is the Panguna mine issue. Also, although people are talking about reopening, although government has decided that we reopen the Panguna mine, there are still issues related to Panguna mine, like the issues on cost sharing, issues on benefit sharing, issues on social disorientation, issues on land ownership and also distribution of benefits. And more importantly, the Bougainville Copper Agreement has not been repealed from the government of Papua New Guinea, and it has not been reviewed. So that's one issue to deal with. The other issue is the consequences or the impacts of the Bougainville War had brought about sorcery accusation-related violence. It has given rise. Approaches taken now are approaches that have never been taken in the history of Bougainville, like we have the witch doctors and fortune tellers who can now, at this time, tell people that that person has made sorcery on you, made magic on you. Before the conflict, in Bougainville custom, There were fortune tellers, there were witch, doctors, but there had never been a time when they would pinpoint someone blaming him or her for sorcery. If there was accusation for sorcery, there was approaches by which they would address sorcery. For example, the first step in addressing sorcery, you have to notify the accused. Let him know about your accusation, why you are accusing that person. And the intent of that is to resolve whatever issue that you have with that person. Unlike in today, once you accuse, you go in, take his life away. That did not happen in the past. That's something I see as being impact of the armed conflict. There's also trauma. In Bougainville, 10 years of conflict, we went into what I describe as 10 years of developmental gap. This 10 years to Bougainvilleans of today, to my understanding, is main cause of trauma, meaning we were all displaced. There are people who are still mourning for the loss of the good things that they had before the conflict. There are people still mourning for the consequences, the impact they had during the conflict. Their loved ones were killed. There are people missing. There were people raped. There are people who are children of gang-backed rapes. These are issues that we need to deal with. And there are also issues around marijuana, drug abuse, these things that we call as being substance abuses. But this is also another issue. The other issue is we also need to demilitarize our former combatants. We have not customarily perform the ritual to signify that the war has ended. So this is also something that is contributing to the generational trauma and violence that we have in Bougainville.
In the blog, you guys have talked a lot about the need for a whole lot more peace building at community level. And I know that one of the things that you particularly are involved in is this Bougainville Community Peace and Security Task Unit. Tell me a bit about that.
The idea about the Community Task Unit is based on the ideology of state-owned policing. In sovereign nations, policing is a state responsibility, meaning state drives policing for the common good of the citizens of that state. When we talk about policing, it's all about alleged crime, and that person remains innocent until proven guilty. Once someone is, alleged that he has committed crime. One of the things within our Melanesian custom is the fact that once you are accused, you are already guilty. So maybe the right terminology in our Melanesian culture would be you are guilty until proven innocent. So that's one of the tasks that task unit would be doing. Once an accusation is made, it's really the task of this task unit to search, assess, respond, and come up with the right action. Say, for example, if someone is accused for sorcery, don't wait until the violence occurs, but you do the work once you hear about the allegation. The second task is they should be the ones facilitating peace building in the communities. And this is something that New Zealand will maybe recall that in Bougainville, it was New Zealand that supported this idea of community auxiliary police well before the establishment of the Bougainville Police Service or well before the police operations on Bougainville began. The idea of the auxiliary police was very similar to what we are now describing as being the task unit. But unfortunately, the community auxiliary police had now be incorporated into the Bougainville Police Service, so means they are now taking orders and commands from the Bougainville Police Service. Whereas if we are serious about peace and sustaining peace, the same approach that we had and initiated community auxiliary police, we need to go back to that. The third thing is that the current community government must take ownership of community peace and security rather than expecting the police to come down and do what is needed to be done. Sometimes the referral pathway is too difficult. Sometimes it's complicated. Sometimes it's expensive. Having the task unit within the community would make it much more easier to access service delivery of justice within the community. The next thing that we think this task unit would be responsible to make is being there to support, establish a sort of a court system, support the implementation of the community courts now, which laws were approved in June last year. These people should be there supporting the community courts in the communities and making sure that whatever needs to be done is done right, and whatever crime that is to be repaired to higher courts, to higher jurisdictions, has to be made, because it becomes a responsibility of the task unit. And I think one final one is basically to help the reintegration of the former combatants, who are now having special status, and they seem to influence a lot of government decisions, a lot of implementations at the higher level. So having this task unit is another way of, we brought in the ex-combatants to be trained as community auxiliary police. But this time we train them and make sure we reintegrate them back, put them on some form of allowance together with the community government members, so they come back and take back their place. Because most of the ex-combatants now, they are born chiefs, but because of this name of ex-combatant, they seem to isolate themselves from the responsibilities they have, and they are not back in their villages. So that's basically the rationale and responsibility of that is thinking around the task unit.
It was a big weekend for Pacifica's sports teams, with both victories celebrated and losses witnessed across the different sporting codes. Celebrations started even before the game ended at North Harbour Stadium, as Moana Pacifica created history with their first back-to-back win in the Super Rugby Pacific competition. There are similar scenes at the National Stadium in Singapore, as the Fiji men's Sevens team clinched the Singapore Sevens title in match-winning fashion on Sunday night. But it wasn't a good weekend for the Fijian Drua franchise, whose teams both lost their matches at the weekend. And joining me is our senior sports journalist, Iliesa Tora. Bula Iliesa, a historic win for Moana Pacifica. Talk us through that.
Yes, Moana Pacifica have stamped their mark as the team to beat in the Super Rugby competition, following their 45-28 win over the Waratahs at North Harbour on Saturday afternoon. The side was trailing 21-7 at half-time. But they returned with six second-half tries to record their first back-to-back wins in the competition. Prop forward Feleti Sae Taufo'o scored a hat-trick of tries and led the fight back as the team, returned in the second 40. And, he said after the game that the message to them was just to restart well, dig deep, and stay in the game. Captain Adi Savea also put up another inspirational performance for the side, and it's obvious now that his influence in the team continues to grow. He told the media after the game that he and his players just left everything out there, and he was proud of the men in the team and for sticking it out there for the team to get that back-to-back win. It was important. As he stated a week earlier, that he had called on Moana Pacifica to forget about the win against the Crusaders in Christchurch the weekend earlier, and to focus on nailing their moments against the Waratahs and get that back-to-back win. He said the character of the team was going to be determined by how they responded against the Waratahs, and they did. They did come back with that good win, claiming their third win in the series. Which has been against top teams, the Hurricanes at home, and the Waratahs at home, and the Crusaders away, which now puts Moana Pacifica in the top 8. And with a very good chance of getting into the top 6.
In Sevens, Fiji took out the Singapore title, which I'm sure was a cause for celebration back at home. How did they manage to do that?
The Fiji men's Sevens team put up a better performance than they did in Hong Kong last week. They didn't do well in Hong Kong. They lost in the semi-finals and were ousted from getting into the final. They also lost in the third place playoff against Australia in Hong Kong. But then, in Singapore this past weekend, they defeated Kenya 21-12 in the final. That title win means the Fijians finished second in overall standing at the end of the 6-event World Sevens Series. It also gave the side their second title in the 2024-2025 series. The change came in the semi-finals where they defeated top of the ladders Argentina. Argentina previously had beaten Fiji a number of times, including just last week in Hong Kong. But Fiji beat them 33-24. What a strong performance that was, and set up.
And just coming back to Super Rugby, the Fijian Drua women didn't celebrate their outing in Ballymore against the Reds. What's the story there?
Unfortunately, the Fijian Drua women's side, fought back strongly in the second half in their Super Rugby W semi-final against the Queensland Reds in Ballymore on Sunday afternoon, and they went down 54-40. But it was too little, too late for the Fijiana side, who struggled in the first half, because the Reds had taken a commanding 42-5 lead after the first 40 minutes. But then the Drua came back, the Fijiana Drua came back in the second 40, and they turned the game on, and they put the pressure on, and there was hope that they were going to make a winning comeback. But in the end, just too strong by the Reds. They had done the damage in the first half, and they managed to get 2 more tries in the second that just had too much for the Fijian Drua to handle.
And it wasn't a good weekend for the Fijian Drua men, who lost to Crusaders in Suva.
It was a struggle for the Fijian Drua when they went down to the Crusaders in Suva on Saturday. Not the expected result for the team, for the home team. They fell 31-14 to the Crusaders at the National Stadium in Suva. Captain Tevita Kanivere said they had a lot of missed opportunities that they didn't use to their advantage, and added that the Crusaders were the better side, dominating in almost all aspects of the game. Ikanivere pointed to the visitors' strong performance at the breakdown and set pieces, which gave them the victory in the end. They had the opportunity to come back in the second half. They had 2 early second half tries, but then again, just too much pressure, too much to chase in the end. And the Crusaders taking their first win in Fiji after having lost there in 2023 and 2024.
That's Pacific Waves for today. For all episodes, head over to rnz.co.nz/Pacific. We're also on Spotify, Apple and iHeartRadio. From myself and the RNZ Pacific team, tō whā soifua.